They won't throw punches, they'll throw something worse. Have you ever walked into a room, excited to share your good news, only to be met with a smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes? No fists thrown, no direct insults, just a strange energy. A backhanded compliment here, a passive-aggressive jab there. It's subtle, but it cuts deeper than you'd expect. That, my friend, is jealousy. And jealous people? They rarely come at you head-on. Instead, they'll disguise their bitterness behind fake laughter, sarcasm dressed up as honesty, and friendly advice that feels more like sabotage. They'll pretend they're rooting for you, but deep down, your progress burns them. Why? Because every step you take forward reminds them of the steps they never took. The dreams they abandoned, the risks they were too scared or too lazy to face. They won't celebrate your growth. They'll downplay it. They won't cheer for your success. They'll quietly try to shame it. And the cruelest part? Most people won't even notice it happening. But today, we're pulling the curtain back. We're exposing the subtle ways jealous people show their true colors when your life becomes a mirror reflecting everything they dislike about their own. Let's start with one of the most common and most frustrating things you'll hear. You're so lucky. Sounds harmless, right? Maybe even sweet. But if you've ever earned something the hard way, you know how that phrase can sting. They'll look you straight in the eyes, flash that fake grin, and drop the L word like it's a compliment. And if you were raised to be humble, you might smile back and even say thank you. But inside, you'll feel it, that twinge of frustration. Because while they call it luck, you remember what it really took. You remember the late nights when sleep felt like a luxury. The mornings when you showed up anyway, even when no one was clapping for you, when no one cared. You remember doubting yourself so much that quitting felt like mercy. But you didn't. You kept going. Where were they when you skipped vacations? While they partied and slept in? Where were they when you traded comfort for consistency, fear for courage, and excuses for discipline? They weren't there, but now they're here, calling it luck. I'll never forget this guy from my old neighborhood. When I launched my first real business, I was grinding 12 to 14 hours a day while holding down a full-time job. I poured every cent I earned into books, courses, and endless trial and error. No mentor, no handouts. Just me, my mistakes, and an unhealthy amount of caffeine. Years later, after a small taste of success, that same guy, who never once asked how I was doing, saw me and said casually, "Man, you're so lucky things worked out for you." Lucky? As if I won the lottery instead of outlasting every excuse that could have stopped me. Here's the truth. People call you lucky when they don't want to admit you outworked them. It's easier for their ego to pretend your success came from chance than to face the fact that they gave up too soon, made too many excuses, or simply didn't try hard enough. When someone says you're lucky, what they're really saying is, "I couldn't do what you did, and I hate that you did it." Sure, luck exists. There's luck in being healthy, luck in crossing paths with an opportunity. But luck is just the matchstick. Discipline is the fire. And most people, they blow that match out before it ever gets a chance to spark. Coming up next, we're going to break down more of these subtle attacks jealous people launch to chip away at your self-worth, often under the guise of kindness. Let's talk about the second thing they'll say, and why it's even more manipulative than the first. Remember that spark they called luck? The one you fought to protect when the world gave you every reason to quit? While they let blessings slip through their fingers, you were out there feeding the fire, alone, tired, determined. They met the right person, and took it for granted. They got a second chance, and wasted it, complaining about how life was unfair. Meanwhile, you took that flicker of hope and turned it into a raging bonfire. You protected it when life tried to blow it out. You fed it with every ounce of discipline when you had nothing left to give. You kept showing up on days when your body was screaming for rest and your mind begged to disappear. Now that your fire finally burns bright enough to be seen, suddenly. They call it luck. How convenient, right? Never apologize for the results of your sacrifice. Never shrink to make insecure people feel safe in their mediocrity. And never waste your breath explaining the cost of your journey to those who never had the courage to start their own. Let them say, luck, if it helps them sleep at night. You, keep building the kind of life they'll only ever watch from the sidelines, because the truth is, they don't actually want that life. They just want the results, not the war it took to earn them. 2. Enjoy it while it lasts. Sounds harmless, right? Like a casual, well-meaning reminder that nothing lasts forever. But listen closely, it's often not advice, it's a wish. A quiet, polite curse wrapped in a smile. When someone says, enjoy it while it lasts, what they're really doing is praying for your downfall. They're hoping your joy is short-lived, that your success unravels, not because you don't deserve it, not because the world is cruel, but because your rise makes their stillness feel unbearable. It reminds them of every excuse they've made, every risk they didn't take, every dream they quietly buried. People who truly believe in you, they don't warn you about the fall. They say, keep going. They say, this is just the beginning. They speak energy into your momentum and fan the flames of your progress. But the envious ones? They hate that you're still rising while they remain stuck. They sit in silence, bitter, regretful, quietly wishing you'd slow down. I'll never forget when it first happened to me. After years of grinding, failing, bleeding for every inch of progress, I hit a major milestone. And one of the first texts I got? Congrats, enjoy it while it lasts. At first, I gave them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they were awkward with words. Maybe they did mean well. But time revealed the truth. They never really celebrated my wins. They never said, I'm proud of you, or what's next. Instead, it was always, be careful, stay grounded, don't forget, this could all disappear. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't encouragement, it was quiet sabotage, a soft crack in the foundation of my confidence, hoping it would spread until everything collapsed. Jealous people rarely come at you head on. They plant seeds of doubt and stand back, waiting for you to self-destruct. That way, they never have to lift a finger. You'll do their work for them. So next time someone says, enjoy it while it lasts, translate it for what it really means. I hope you lose it. I hope you fail. I hope it wasn't real. I hope you're not really as good as you seem. And here's the uncomfortable truth no one talks about. They don't just hope you fall. They need you to. Because as long as you keep rising, they'll have to admit something brutal. Their life didn't stay small because of bad luck. It stayed small because they quit. You're the living, breathing proof that it could have been different. And that truth eats them alive. When they see you thriving, they feel attacked, not because you're hurting them, but because your success screams the question they're too afraid to answer. If you could do it, why didn't they? And that's why they cling to the idea that your success is temporary. Because if it isn't, if you're really built for this, then they'll have to face the truth they've been hiding from all along. As you've seen, your success didn't happen by luck. It's the result of perseverance, effort, and those silent battles you fought alone. And yet, instead of congratulations, some people offer backhanded remarks wrapped in subtle envy. Maybe you worked harder. Maybe you stayed resilient when things crumbled. Maybe you simply wanted it more, and they didn't. That's why you'll almost never hear, enjoy it while it lasts, from someone more successful than you. You'll hear it from people you've outgrown. People who secretly believe you don't deserve the life they were too afraid to chase themselves. So what should you do when you hear those words? Smile, thank them, and keep going. Because every time you rise beyond their expectations, every time you stay standing when they hoped you'd fall, you're not just living your dream, you're exposing their excuses. Your success is no accident. It's not temporary. It's not fragile. It's built on a foundation they will never understand, because they never had the courage to lay it themselves. So when they say, enjoy it while it lasts, build it so strong it outlasts their jealousy, their doubt, their bitterness, and when you get there, don't waste a second looking back. They were never rooting for you anyway. And then, there's that moment, the accusation you never saw coming. Oh, so you think you're better than us now? Huh? That one always comes like a dagger, sudden, sharp, and undeserved. You weren't showing off. You weren't competing or comparing. You were just minding your business, building your life brick by brick, climbing your own mountain. But somehow, your growth, your quiet, focused progress, was enough to offend them. Your self-respect? They call it arrogance. Your standards? They take as insults. Here's the truth few people can accept. You don't have to say a single word to make insecure people feel threatened. Your ambition, your discipline, your evolution, they remind others of the parts of themselves they've abandoned, neglected, or given up on. When they say, you think you're better than everyone, what they're really saying is, you make me feel small, and I hate it. I remember a season in my life when I started changing deeply. I stopped partying so much. I started waking up early, working harder, chasing something more meaningful than short-term pleasure. And slowly, certain people around me started acting different. Passive-aggressive comments, half-hearted compliments, cold shoulders. One night, after I turned down yet another invite to waste another weekend doing nothing, a so-called friend snapped, "Oh, look at you. You think you're better than us now." Huh? I laughed it off. But inside, I realized something. People who are committed to staying the same will always resent those who choose to grow. It's not about thinking you're better. It's about thinking differently. It's about living by values they abandoned long ago. And really, what does better even mean? Better than what? Better than mediocrity? Better than distraction and excuses? Better than complaining about a life you refuse to change? If that's what better means, then yes, maybe you are better, and maybe it's time we stop apologizing for it. There's a truth no one likes to admit. Growth creates distance. When you level up, you force the people around you to make a choice. Grow with you, or stay behind and resent you for it. Continuing from the last point, perhaps the most painful truth is this: not everyone will be happy about your growth. Some people will cheer you on. Some will rise up and challenge themselves to meet you where you are. But many, far too many, will choose to tear you down instead of lifting themselves up. Because let's face it, tearing someone else down is so much easier than confronting your own laziness, your own fear, your own regret. When someone says, "Oh, you think you're better than everyone else now?" what they're really doing is holding up a mirror. Not for you, but for themselves. They're showing you the parts of their soul they know are broken but refuse to fix. And honestly, that is not your responsibility. You are not here to make other people feel comfortable in their smallness. Your only job is to walk your path, fully, boldly, unapologetically. Never shrink yourself to soothe someone else's insecurity. Never dim your light just because someone else is afraid of the dark. If your growth makes them uncomfortable, so be it. If your ambition feels like a threat, so be it. If your evolution reminds them of how long they've been standing still, then that's on them. You didn't betray them. They betrayed themselves, the very moment they chose comfort over greatness. Here's the final, inconvenient truth. You don't think you're better than them. You just refuse to be worse. And for people like that refusal is unforgivable. And then comes a line you'll hear eventually. Must be nice to have everything handed to you. It's a classic, a bitter jab, dressed up as a compliment. They say it with a half smile, like they're just joking, but you can hear the acid in their tone. Can't you? You can feel it, the resentment, the envy, the refusal to believe that maybe, just maybe, you worked for what you have. People who say this, They're not trying to understand your journey. They don't care about the battles you fought, the tears you cried, the silent nights you spent rebuilding what was broken inside you. No, they're trying to erase your story. Because if they can convince themselves that you were simply handed everything, then they don't have to face a brutal truth. You earned something. Something they were too lazy, too scared, or too distracted to build. I remember a moment like that in my own life. After years of grinding, of failing in silence, of losing sleep, losing friends, losing parts of myself I thought I'd never recover. A small visible success finally happened. Something tangible, something people could actually see. And right then, someone smirked and said, "Must be nice to have everything handed to you." I was speechless, because nothing, absolutely nothing, had ever been handed to me. I had bled for every inch. But that's how jealousy works. It doesn't look at the full picture. It zooms in on your rewards, and pretends your struggles didn't exist. It forgets the years you were invisible. It forgets the seasons when no one clapped for you. It forgets the pain, the fear, the aching loneliness you battled through, just to stand where you are now. Because to admit that you earned it would force them to admit that they didn't. And that kind of honesty? Most people just aren't strong enough to reach it. Here's the uncomfortable secret. Most people don't want success to be about discipline, sacrifice, and delayed gratification. They want it to be about luck, about privilege, about getting lucky breaks and being handed things. Because if success is just about luck, then their failure isn't their fault. If it's about privilege, then their stagnation is justified. They can stay safe in their comfort zone, guilt-free. They don't have to change. They don't have to try harder. We just mentioned the jealousy behind the statement. It would be nice to give it to you. Now, the truth goes deeper. Because if they admitted that you actually worked for it, then they'd have to face something terrifying. That they could have done it too, but didn't. They'd have to look in the mirror each morning and hear that haunting whisper from within. You could have been more. And that's something they don't want to face. So instead of acknowledging your effort, they say, "Must be nice to have everything handed to you." But what they're really saying is, "I'm too afraid to do what you did." It's easier to believe you got lucky than to believe they're capable too. It's simpler to call you lucky than to call themselves lazy. It's more comfortable to think the universe picked you than to admit they've been rejecting their own potential every time they chose excuses over effort. But here's what you need to understand. You don't owe them an explanation. You don't have to list out the sleepless years. You don't have to open your wounds for their inspection. You don't have to waste a single second proving your worth to people who've already chosen to stay blind. Your success doesn't need their permission. Your story doesn't need their validation. Because deep down, they already know. They know nothing was handed to you. They know you bled for it. They know you crawled through storms they wouldn't have survived even a week in. And that truth, is what devours them from the inside out. So the next time someone says, "Must be nice to have everything handed to you," smile. Smile like someone who knows the truth. Smile like someone who remembers the nights they almost gave up, but didn't. Smile like someone who understands that jealousy is just admiration that rotted. Because the person feeling it didn't have the courage to become who they secretly wanted to be. And then, get back to building. Because while they're busy spinning fairy tales to explain your success, you'll be busy writing your future. And they'll spend the rest of their lives wishing they had done the same. And then, another voice chimes in. "I heard you only got it because of connections." Ah yes, the classic safety net of every jealous mind. If it wasn't luck, then surely it must have been favoritism, right? Because, God forbid, what if it was actually your hard work, your skill, your real talent? Funny how they never say it to your face. It's always whispered behind your back, like some cheap rumor passed around by people who'd rather gossip about success than create their own. The moment you start winning, The moment you start stepping into rooms they only dream of, suddenly, your talent vanishes in their eyes. Your discipline disappears. Your sacrifices? Forgotten. No, it couldn't possibly be that you outworked them. It couldn't be that you stayed up late grinding while they were scrolling. It couldn't be that you studied, failed, learned, failed again, and finally built something powerful. No, in their minds, it had to be connections. Because to believe otherwise would shatter the excuses they've built their entire lives on. I've lived this. I remember landing a huge opportunity once. Something I had dreamed about for years. And suddenly, people who hadn't spoken to me in months started hearing things. Oh, he only got that because he knew someone. They just gave it to him. It's who you know, not what you know. And I realized something powerful. Small minds can't comprehend big work. They're incapable of believing success might actually be earned. Because if they believed that, they'd have to let go of every excuse they cling to. So they invent shortcuts in your story. They stitch together some fantasy where you woke up one day, bumped into the right person, and just floated to the top, without a single scar. Because if they truly admitted that you built it all yourself, they'd have to face a terrifying question. Why didn't I? You see, it's much easier to believe you were handed everything than to accept that they wasted years avoiding the hard work. But let's be honest for a second. Connections mean nothing if you bring no value. You could know every wealthy and powerful person in the world, but if you're unreliable, untalented, lazy, or fake, don't expect them to lift a finger for you. No one opens the door for someone who doesn't deserve to be inside. No one bets on dead weight. No one's willing to risk their name for someone who can't deliver. And even if, just if, you did get in the room because of a connection, guess what? You still had to be good enough to stay. You still had to perform when the lights were on. You still had to hold your ground under pressure, while people silently hoped you'd crack. That part, they'll never talk about it. Because it doesn't fit the story they tell themselves to feel better about playing it safe. Here's the truth you need to accept. People would rather believe you cheated than admit you worked harder. Because if they accept that you earned it, they have no choice but to confront their own laziness. And trust me, facing yourself is way harder than blaming others. So let them whisper. Let them spin their stories. Let them cling to the comforting illusion that the world is unfair. That you just got lucky. While they're busy explaining away your wins, you'll be busy stacking new ones. Because the people building legacies don't waste time justifying themselves to people still building excuses. And one day, when they're still gossiping, still bitter, still stuck, you'll be so far ahead, you won't even hear them anymore. And then comes the next line they love to throw around. Money isn't everything. You usually hear that one right when you start making real progress. When you're no longer struggling like the rest. When you're not drowning in bills anymore. Not stuck in the paycheck to paycheck cycle. Money isn't everything. Funny how you never hear that from people who actually have money. It only comes from those who don't. From those who secretly resent the freedom you now have. The kind they only dare to dream about. Think about it. When you were broke, stressed, barely hanging on, did anyone ever tell you, money doesn't matter? No. In fact, many of them looked down on you. You weren't good enough. You hadn't made it. But the moment you start leveling up, suddenly money is meaningless. Suddenly, you're materialistic for wanting financial security. Suddenly, you're shallow for building a life they wish they had the courage to pursue. It's pure jealousy, disguised as fake wisdom. I remember the first time I started doing well financially. People who had watched me struggle for years, without ever offering help, suddenly started preaching about spiritual wealth and true happiness. Where were those speeches when I couldn't pay rent? Where was that money doesn't matter philosophy when I couldn't even fix my car? Let's be real. Money isn't everything, but it changes everything. It buys you time. It buys you freedom. It buys you choices. It gives you access to better healthcare, better opportunities, better environments. It allows you to protect the people you love. And most importantly, it gives you the power to live life on your own terms. We talked about a hard truth. Money isn't everything, but it changes everything, from the way you live to how others treat you. Now let's go deeper into something most people are afraid to admit. Money gives you the ability to walk away from toxic jobs, toxic relationships, and draining environments without being trapped just because you need a paycheck. No, money isn't everything, but it reveals everything. It shows who's genuinely happy for you and who's just playing the part. It exposes who's secretly competing with you and who's truly been supporting you all along. It reveals who had integrity when you were broke and who suddenly shifted once you started to shine. People who are truly at peace with themselves don't envy your success. They don't need to minimize your achievements to feel good about their own lives. But still, you'll hear someone say, "Money isn't everything." Sounds like they're trying to teach you something. But really, they're just trying to soothe their own insecurity. They're trying to convince themselves that what they couldn't get wasn't worth having in the first place. It's the same mindset as a kid who loses a game, storms off, and yells, "I didn't even want to win." Childish, transparent. Here's the truth. Most people are too afraid to say, "Money matters a lot." And anyone telling you otherwise is either lying to you or lying to themselves. Money alone won't make you happy. It won't replace love, meaning, or purpose, but it gives you the freedom to pursue those things without being chained to survival. It lets you choose your problems instead of having them forced on you. Because let's be honest, struggling to feed your family isn't romantic. Choosing between rent and groceries isn't noble. Living in constant fear that one emergency will break you, that's not spiritual. That's just suffering, and there's nothing enlightened about it. So the next time someone throws that phrase, "Money isn't everything," at you like a weapon, just smile. Smile like someone who remembers every late night grinding. Smile like someone who knows exactly what it felt like to be broke, and remembers who stayed silent when it counted most. Smile like someone who understands. Money is not the enemy, bitterness is. And while they're still pretending money doesn't matter, you'll be busy building a life where you don't have to pretend at all. Next part, you've changed. Funny, isn't it? No one says that when you're stuck. No one says you've changed when you keep repeating the same mistakes. They only say it once you begin to grow into a version of yourself they never expected, or secretly feared. Let's be honest, most people don't want you to evolve. They want you predictable, familiar, easy to manage. They want you stuck in your old role, just like before. But the moment you start walking differently, talking differently, thinking differently, suddenly, you're the problem. Not because you've become worse, but because they no longer know how to control you. When someone says, "You've changed," what they really mean is, "You stopped making me comfortable. You stopped shrinking to make them feel big. You started setting boundaries where they used to walk all over you." And they hate that, not because you're fake now, but because you're finally real. Real with yourself. Real about what you want. Real about who you no longer need in your life. I still remember when I started changing. Taking care of myself. Reading more. Pulling back from pointless hangouts. Spending more time in silence. Suddenly, people started saying I was weird. Too serious. That I thought I was better than them. But no, I just got tired of staying stuck. Tired of pretending I was okay with living a mediocre life. In the previous section, we talked about change, about daring to break out of your old shell and become the truest version of yourself. But that kind of change isn't always welcomed, because eventually, you'll grow tired of being around people who only know how to bond through complaining, gossiping, and wasting time just to get through the day. As you grow, those who stay the same will begin to feel left behind. Even if you never say a word, your growth will sound like arrogance to the insecure. Your peace will look like ego to the chaotic. And your success? They'll see it as betrayal, simply because they once benefited from your struggle. But here's the truth. You were born to change. You were born to outgrow who you used to be. You were born to become a version of yourself that even your past would be amazed by. Ask yourself this: do you really want applause from people who still live with the mindset they had 5 years ago? "You've changed" is not an insult. It's evidence. Evidence that you've done the one thing most people are too afraid to do: evolve. So let them talk. Let them whisper behind your back. Let them call you fake, distant, arrogant, because the only people who feel offended by your change are the ones who refused to grow with you. They choose to stay where it's comfortable. But you're chasing something greater, something deeper, and you don't owe your past, or the people who preferred you broken, any kind of explanation. Jealousy never says, "I feel insecure because you're doing better than me." Instead, it says things like, "You're just lucky. Enjoy it while it lasts." You think you're better than everyone, don't you? Must be nice to have everything handed to you. But here's the truth. People don't attack what doesn't threaten them. They only throw stones at what shines. Their words don't say anything about you. They're confessions of fear, of regret, of failing to grow. Because it's much easier to tear someone down than to admit you stopped climbing. And you know what? You don't owe anyone an explanation. Not for your success, not for your blessings, not for the new life you've worked so hard to build. Let them talk. Let them diminish your wins to make themselves feel better. Let them tell each other whatever stories help them sleep at night. Meanwhile, you're living proof of one simple truth. It can be done, and the higher you rise, the quieter the noise becomes.